welcome back to my channel. I am excited this week to continue our discussion on what is narcissistic personality disorder. Remember, I said there had to be a part two. Based on all the information that I have for today, there is going to have to also be a part three because, again, this is such a complex disorder and it's an abuse cycle pattern, and then it's a relational pattern of dynamics that play out. So we have to kind of dissect. So for today's part two, I want to go into a little bit more of the abuse cycle. When I talked about the idealization phase, which is the love bombing, I want to explain more of what that is. I want to get more into the patterns of behavior, knowing what to recognize concretely when we talk about the patterns of behaviors, um, and more a little bit more about the gaslighting, all the terminologies that need to be fully explained. I want to go into today. And if we have time, I'll go more into the different relationship types with the narcissist and ways to start recovering and moving forward and breaking that cycle of starting a new chapter for yourself, being armed with the information that you're getting about the disorder. So, for today, we're going to talk about the abuse cycle some more. So, we talk about in the beginning the love bomb and the idealization stage. That's the honeymoon period. Most relationships have honeymoon periods, but this one is a different type of honeymoon period where they're really turning up the antics. They're really trying to get you hooked and kind of addicted to them by having a lack of boundaries. So um, they will flatter them excessively. They will give them all sorts of attention, morning, noon, and night, um, constant text, gift giving. They share secrets, tell stories, all in an effort to create this special bond. This technique also enables you to feel as if you can share your deepest secrets, let your guards down, in which they will later use to devalue you, um, and use as ammunition to pick at your weak spots to regain a sense of control, psychological control over you. Yet it is during the honeymoon phase that these toxic partners reel you in and make you dependent on them, hook, line, and sinker. So in a narcissist ideation phase, you've never felt any better. You feel beautiful, you feel loved, you feel special, cherished, and you feel like you've met your soulmate, your true match. This is a technique known widely in the survivor community as love bombing, which is what I was saying last video. In the love bombing or idealization phase, narcissists mirror their victims' deepest values and interests to make them feel like they have met the one. The devaluation follows, combined with periodic love bombing, conditions the victim to walk on eggshells. Um, so they go back and forth through the devaluation phase. So it makes you uneasy, like you're yearning for the good times when things are good. Um, so when the devaluation starts, you stick around and you're like, okay, you start to internalize it. Am I doing something wrong? Because he was really good in the beginning. I don't know what changed. So kind of all to keep you on your toes. Um, so so you hope that the honeymoon period will last, only to inevitably experience yet another abusive incident that adds on to the cycle of trauma. Narcissistic abusers rely on the victim's need for validation and approval, as well as a sense of worthlessness they've instilled in them throughout the abuse cycle, to remain dependent on their abusers. These abusers will give you just the minimum amount of attention to keep you by their side, wishing you could go back to the idealization phase. As the abuse gets incrementally worse, the abuse victim gets more and more conditioned to the abuse and invested in the abuse relationship due to the biochemical and trauma bonds. Also have to go into trauma bond at some point. The devaluation stage. So narcissists are covert, meaning they're very subtle, underhanded, and incredibly manipulative in the ways they devalue their victims. They target both your insecurities as well as what you're most proud of. It's a mix of both. If you tell them that what you're most insecure about, they'll make sure to sneak in a cutting remark at some point about it. If you tell them that you're most proud of accomplishing, they'll find ways to diminish your pride and make you feel as if you're not as special. Because, of course, only they are allowed to be special and unique. This devaluation can be disguised as harsh jokes or brutal honesty, when they in fact involve verbal abuse, name calling, condescending sarcasm, a sudden withdrawal of affection, overt or covert put downs, or unhealthy comparisons to others to instill a sense of worthlessness. The devaluation can also be overt and heinous. Psychologists speculate that narcissists engage in devaluation of their partners because while they rely on their partner's ability to enhance their own self-esteem and bolster their sense of false superiority, the partner inevitably becomes real and imperfect to them throughout the course of the relationship because they are less likely to see the narcissist as perfect. So in the beginning, you're seeing them as perfect. Oh my gosh, I met my Prince Charming, my soulmate. And then over time, through the devaluation stage and sometimes discard stage, you're seeing their true colors and that maybe they're not so nice and you're calling them out on it. So the more that happens, the more the narcissists want to discard you because you're now seeing them for who they are. They can no longer love bomb you, they can no longer escape accountability. And then that's when um, the narcissist's really true colors come out. Um, a victim's plea for the abuser to acknowledge his or her emotional needs is presumably one that the narcissist perceives as a narcissistic injury, anything that you're calling them out on. And indeed, this causes the narcissistic rage, where you see the true self, where the nastiness comes out, the slandering, the name calling, the shaming, the blaming, the smear campaign that we talked about. Um, A narcissistic rage, a reaction to the perceived challenge to the perfect image the narcissist cultivated of themselves in the idealization phase. After the devaluation phase, so the discard, that's the discard phase. After the devaluation phase, you will be discarded, often in the worst manner possible. Discarded is a term used for when the narcissist gets tired of his current supply and often moves on to his next one. He's probably found somebody else that's given him the attention that he was getting in the beginning with you. During the discard, the narcissist is done with you. So there will be no emotional support, much less any form of closure or attempt at making you feel better about the discard. Narcissists want you to feel so small that they will perform the discard in the worst way to make you feel less than human and less than worthy. It is often during the devaluation stage and the discard stage that victims of narcissistic abuse are most humiliated and degraded. This is a way for the narcissist to prove to himself or herself that you are no longer necessary in their life, because in their perspective, you have not met their needs as a source of supply. So, who can endlessly cater to their false image despite subjecting you to emotional and possibly even physical beatings? So you're supposed to just take, and not have no feelings, no thoughts on anything. And if that's not the case, then you didn't meet their needs. Believe it or not, a horrific discard by a narcissistic partner is, in fact, a traumatic event because it challenges everything we know to be normal. Much like when we experience physical pain, the brain releases pain-killing opioids when we experience rejection. Rejection literally hurts. Imagine how much it hurts then to have someone who once seemingly adored you devalue you, and even worse, abuse you horrifically before they throw you away like nothing ever happened. A discard in itself is a traumatic event, but the numerous microaggressions, rejections, and abuses throughout the relationship created a chain of traumatic events. And it is that chain of trauma that makes it so very difficult to recover from being involved with a narcissist. The next phase of the abuse cycle is called hovering. Hovering is what a narcissist does to keep track of his victims, to see if you're still a source of supply sitting there waiting for him even after he discarded you. Um, it's a way for them to continue to have options, who they want to call, when they want to call. But let's go into more of what the book was saying. Many victims, but not all victims, experience an additional phase of the abuse cycle after the discard known as hovering. This is when the narcissist likes to, like a hover vacuum, attempts to suck you back into the traumatic vortex of the relationship. Usually, this occurs when the narcissist loses control of the victim and wants to regain control at the very moment the victim attempts to move forward with his or her life. They begin to re-idealize their former partner and the relationship while devaluing any current relationship they have. So this is how they operate. They go from one to the next, back and forth. It's chaos, toxicity. Hovering has no time limit or boundaries. Narcissists have been known to hover old victims when they are newly married, have children, or years later unexpectedly. It gives them a thrill to know that their old source of supply are ready and waiting in case they decide to swoop in for a temporary rendezvous and re-traumatization before exiting their lives yet again. How disgusting of a person can you be, right? Like years and years later, when someone is newly married, when someone has children, there's no boundaries at all with these people. The hover may come in a phone call, an email, a text, or even showing up at the victim's house. It can also take place through the messenger network of a third party. They like doing that. After the discard phase, hovering confuses victims into thinking the narcissist misses them, when in reality, the narcissist employs hovering as a way to regain power and control, especially if the victim discarded the narcissist first. Wow. This method enables the abuse cycle to continue, especially if the victim is susceptible to their hovering attempts, which is why the next session that we'll go into later on, when you realize someone like this is in your life, the best way to get rid of them is through no contact, go ghosting. I think that's where the term ghosting came in. Block, delete, no contact. They don't need to know anything about you. Sometimes you might need to cut off people who are connected to them closely so that your information doesn't get out. They don't need to know anything about you. They don't need to know your address. They don't need to know anything about you. So they can't contact you again later on, especially if you're still recovering from the abuse. You still have some emotional trauma bonding to them. It's very important to go ghost, heal on your own. They're not going to give you closure. They're not going to give you any type of respect. They're only going to suck you right back into the cycle. So cutting it off and healing on your own. We'll talk more about ways to recover and regain your power later on. But I wanted to finish up the, 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 the hovering, discard, and devaluation cycle. So everything that they do is all about power and control and making themselves feel better. So there's no hope for the relationship. I know it might seem like you want to go back and relive the old times and thinking that there's a piece of them that was actually genuine. Everything was by design, everything was an act, manipulation tactic. So it's important once you realize someone is a narcissist to break away and do not try to talk about it. Do not try to come to any compromise. It's a done deal, unfortunately. So now we're going to talk about different types of narcissists. We talked a lot about the abuse cycle in regards to romantic partners, But in the first video I mentioned, there's all types of narcissists. So we have them in friendships, we have them in parents, we have them in bosses, we have them, online cyberbullying. There's different types of narcissists. They come, they're everywhere, right? So you want to be aware of the different types and how they operate, and how to have to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. So the first one is family members and parents. Um, so narcissistic parents, as we talked about in the first video, they treat their children as trophies. Those are the parents who usually spoil their kids. And then you have the narcissistic parents who are abusive to their kids and put down their kids and have them feel like they don't have a voice, they don't matter. Um, they make the children feel like they're like an object to them. Um, and they're only there to give them their parents supply. Their parents are living vicariously through them. They're seeing them as an extension of themselves, where the child doesn't have a voice. Like I said, it's really what the parent wants for them and what they want them to achieve to make them feel good, or to have them relive some life that they wish they had. Or they're just living through their children vicariously. Um, 1 second. Narcissistic parents may take objectification to a whole new level. So think of toddlers and tiaras, where the mothers pathologically objectify their children in order to live out their own dreams of being a beauty queen. So this type of behavior may also be amplified in families where children are taught a high sense of entitlement, which I said in the first video, especially in higher socioeconomic classes. They see their children as extension of themselves to a pathological extent and want them to achieve what they could not. While normal parents can do this to some extent, the narcissistic parent subjects their children to verbal beatings and emotional battery, sometimes even physical abuse, in order to get them to comply with their needs and desires. There are even narcissistic and sociopathic parents who sexually abuse their children because they have no qualms about overstepping boundaries. In addition, female narcissistic mothers tend to be jealous of their daughters and treat their daughters as competition rather than family. So that's some heavy stuff, right? And if anyone out there has experienced any of this and this is triggering you in any way right now, I'm holding space with you. But it's good to know that, you're gaining awareness and you're recognizing that you were never at fault or never to blame. These people are not empathetic, they're not compassionate, they're only out for self and their own selfish gratification at the extent, or whatever extent, at the expense of any and anyone, even their own children. So that's very sad. Um, when they lose control of their children, narcissistic rage precedes any empathy or compassion. Children are not taught to pursue what makes them happy, but rather they must pursue what makes their parents happy. And if they don't, they will be put down, abused, and verbally, emotionally, and psychologically berated. Much like narcissists in relationships, narcissistic parents engage in this type of rage to maintain control as their kids grow older. So something I've learned a lot with narcissistic parents is their children, the children usually adore them in younger stages where the parents are able to make decisions for them without them knowing what's going on or caring what's going on, as long as the narcissistic parent is, buying their love, buying their affection, treating them like trophies, not having them have any accountability or responsibility until they're older now and they're starting to realize and having their own thoughts, their own wants and ideas. That's when the narcissistic parent and them start clashing, and they're looking at their parent like, whoa, we were once good, but now, you're doing all these things. And so usually in adolescent stages is when you notice the pattern becoming more and more prevalent in that dynamic. Um, so they are more likely to be idealized as children when they are fully under the control of their parents, though they can certainly be devalued and abused in numerous ways as children as well, depending on the circumstances. It's either one or the other. And usually, narcissistic parents, if they have two or more children, they'll have one child that they uh, value, and then one that they devalue. And sometimes they put their kids against each other to compete against each other. And it's a way to kind of keep everyone toxic and dysfunctional and on their toes. So just really bad people. They are hypercritical and rarely provide you with emotional validation. They also tend to follow an enmesh family style where there's no boundaries. Narcissistic parents put down your goals, downplay your achievements, remind you constantly of what you have yet to achieve, and put you down as much as possible so you never have the sense of worthiness and security that all children have a right to have as soon as they are born. They rarely validate your emotions and they neglect to provide you with appropriate emotional support. When you are crying, they will criticize you for crying. When you are laughing too hard, they will berate you for being loud and inappropriate. Much like narcissistic dating partners, they hate to see you happy. Unless it's due to an accomplishment they can show off to others. Yet their style of parenting tends to be incredibly engulfing, controlling, and overbearing. They may micromanage each aspect of the lives of their children, or on the other hand, in this end of the spectrum, they may struggle with issues such as addiction that they use to excuse rageful attacks and overall neglect of their children. So they hide behind chemical and substance abuse. They only care about their own image. So we're talking about narcissistic parenting, but a lot of this sounds just like the narcissistic partner, right? So it's just narcissistic people in general. But how it plays out with children, it's very traumatic because then that's what causes the new cycle of narcissists or empaths, which is what I said. So this is how it's created. This is a vicious cycle. Um, so narcissistic coworkers and bosses. I don't want to go too much into it. Um, but if you guys want me to do a whole segment on narcissistic coworkers and bosses, because that does happen very often, um, the goal is, to really remain as professional as possible and document everything. And that's what I tell clients as well. You want to have, you want to deal with them very direct and concretely and evidence based, fact based. So you're not laughing and playing games with them, documenting any incident. You're going to call things out in when it happens directly and assertively. So what I would do with a client is teach a client assertion skills and boundary setting skills to not shy away from any type of confrontation. I call it conversation because when we're not going into arguing, we're not name calling, we're not shaming, definitely not blaming. So we're going to be taking accountability. And so when you call someone out in the moment, there is no negating it because it just happened, right? It's right there in the memory bank. So calling things out, documenting things, and taking it to the chain of command. Um, a boss, you take it to the boss's boss. We're gonna figure this out. That's how you got to deal with a narcissist in the workplace. And if it's a boss, deep breaths, mindful breathing, they said, and remaining as professional as possible. And again, you want to document things for your own. So if it does go to HR, it's not just your word against theirs. You have things right there in the record keeping. So hopefully that was helpful. But I don't want to take too long with these videos because uploading and storage is a beast. So yeah, the next section is how to deal with narcissists you can't avoid. So remember we talked about co-parenting or being the child of a parent that you're not out their home yet, or even the boss. You have to keep this job. You can't quit right now. So 6 ways to skillfully respond. So number one is the gray rock method. Narcissists get excitement primarily out of provoking you and seeing you respond in anger, confusion, or despair. They feed off of that. So since their emotional lives are so flat and bland, unless they feel the rage of a narcissistic injury, witnessing human beings have emotional reaction is like getting tickets to a free show. Wow. The puppeteer loves watching his or her puppets perform, after all. The gray rock method, which basically consists of having very flat or boring responses to usual provocation or triangulation tactics, leaves narcissists with very little supply and excitement. It's like taking away a kid's favorite treat when you look at them with a poker face during their usual antics. It also saves you a lot of energy and gives you the satisfaction of knowing you've withheld their usual supply. And you're also giving yourself less stress and less anxiety because all that is not good for the body, right? So, knowing that you're dealing with someone like this and by not responding is actually the best method and it's good for you. It's a win win. So, don't feed into any of the tactics, pretty much. Um, Most importantly, it makes it less likely that the narcissist will continue to pursue you as supply. Once they know you can't give them the reactions they're desperately looking for, they're going to move on to someone else, right? So the best way is to not respond or minimal low response. You want to treat them like a toddler. Avoid triggering subjects and derail catastrophic conversations. Narcissists enjoy using circular conversations, meaningless word salad, and countless contradictions to mess with your mind, deflect your attention off their abuse, and keep you off balance. They'll deny saying something, they'll contradict something they said earlier, they'll bring in irrational arguments, and they'll continue to break your boundaries in ways that leaves you inevitably frustrated. This keeps the focus off the narcissist's actual behavior and leaves you wasting precious energy and time trying to figure out what's exactly being said, what's going on. Think of it as looking through garbage trying to extract gems. Except there are no gems, you're just becoming a hoarder of the narcissist's useless crazy making tactics. So, to prevent this from happening, changing the subject to a harmless topic the narcissist is genuinely interested in. So, changing the subject, controlling the conversation, pretty much. Don't let them control the conversation. Something he or she is likely to want to talk about. Cutting off the conversation abruptly, like, excuse me, I have to go, I'm busy doing something else. Acknowledging the statement positively or making a joke out of the statement. Yeah. Make the narcissist a source of your supply. This technique is not for everyone, and I'm mainly suggesting it for the workplace or for a professional connection. If you find you feel guilty by doing this and would prefer not to gain anything at all from the interaction, you should honor that. I included this suggestion only as a way to offer a variety of options. Since the narcissist uses you for supply without remorse, and this post is geared towards superficial forced interactions with narcissists, you can also try to think of ways a narcissist can benefit or help you since he or she is out to exploit you anyways. So you're kind of both getting something from the relationship. So think of the ways a coworker can serve you since you have to interact with him or her. Do they have special skills or talents that you can learn from them? Is their network big enough to help you make new connections? So again, just the goal is just to be armed and aware. So if you know who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with, you can deal with them accordingly. Just knowing that you're not feeding into any of their antics, you're going to have boundaries and you're going to have good assertion skills, and you're 2 steps ahead of them. The fourth one is opposite action. This technique can be used quickly and effectively when emotions threaten to get the best of us. It's very simple. When you feel like getting angry at the narcissist's provocative statements, smile instead. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a real smile or a fake one. So chances are your emotions will soon follow your facial expression. Interesting. Your mood will improve and you will feel less stressed than if you did not perform this action. You'll be more calm and relaxed while the narcissist scratches his head or his or her head wondering why you're not responding in the usual way. So yeah, everything they do is for response and reaction. And to know that they're so bored and bland and this is what they do for excitement, you're going to take away that excitement from them. You're not going to be the center of attention for them to observe and get a feed off of. They get nothing or they get this, right? So these are just some techniques for, the workplace. And it can also be for working with, anyone you come across that, is you suspect to have some kind of character defect. Um, Co-parenting. There's no section on that, but I'm going to speak just from my own knowledge because I know that's a big one. I encourage, you know, the parent who, is on the other end dealing with a narcissist to also document. A lot of times people are texting, so those are good ways to keep track. And if you're able to get a good lawyer when it comes to custody issues, I would say hire an attorney. You can also advocate for yourself by going to the courthouse and filing a motion for if the parent needs to be on visitation because they feel like they want to show up whenever they want to show up, or they're making promises that you're going to take the child this weekend and don't take the child the next weekend. Also, putting a parent like that on child support if they don't want to pay, or if they're missing payments, or if they feel like they shouldn't have to pay. Dealing with them in a punitive way is the best way to go. So, having court documents, court records, having them on some type of motion keeps them in check, most of them in check. If they are not complying, you want to refile the motions to let the judges and the court know that, hey, they're not complying, because eventually that works in your favor where the judge is going to give you full custody eventually, because the narcissist is going to make themselves show for who they really are over time by holding them accountable. When you're not holding them accountable is when they keep getting away with things, and then your child is suffering. So going the legal route is what I would recommend if you're co-parenting with a narcissist who's not in compliance. um, no talking, no trying to compromise. If you've been there, done that for years, go the legal route. The best way is to hire an attorney if you have the means of income for that. If not, you can file court motions yourself. They have mediators at the court that you guys can try to mediate with. Um, or, like I said, eventually they'll realize that this person is not compliant and they're not serving the best interest of the child. So you'll eventually get full custody just by them being who they are naturally. But that takes a long time and it's kind of draining. But that is, the sooner you start, the better it is over time versus giving them options and giving them chances, and you're wasting time because they're never going to really change, and your child is suffering with the inconsistencies. Your child is suffering by not getting the support that they deserve financially from that parent. You want to just hold them accountable. And this is why the court is the best way to go when it comes to co-parenting with a narcissist. So hopefully today's video was informative. I know it's a lot of information. Next, part 3, we'll definitely be going into ways to recover and heal from having encountered a narcissist and a narcissist abuse, and having to deal with a narcissist. But the two things I want to give away for today, and I'll go more into, is going no contact. If this is someone that you have no child with, you have no connection to, you weren't married to this person, you don't have to work with this person, this person is not someone that you have to live in the same household with, no contact. Ghost. Go ghost. Block, delete. Easy peasy, right? If this is someone that you have to co-parent with, we talked about that. If it's someone that you have to work with, we talked about ways to deal with that. But you want to at least have minimal contact as much as possible. Avoid this person as much as possible. But if you have to, you want to keep cool, you want to keep calm, you want to not feed into their energy. Do not give them the energy that they're looking for. Um, and I think those were the main ones. So next week we'll go into the healing process and how to regain your power and take control back of your life. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. Peace. Be well.